Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far as the Esports World Cup picks up steam. Big questions have been raised over the last couple of days. What about the return of many of the legends of the scene? Scump and Formal have talked about it over the last few days. Scump certainly gives his thoughts on returning if Formal were to choose to last night, but also the roster deadline has been confirmed when these CDL teams have to confirm what their roster's actually going to be, and it's rather sooner than we might have expected. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, quickly on the sniper rifles here in Black Ops 6. The game's coming out later this year. The snipers for the last few years have been GA'd, right? We know this for a fact. The pros have decided that they're too strong and they're going to get rid of them for various reasons. And, well, is that going to be the same story again in this upcoming title? That's a big question right now, honestly, because in many ways, the snipers, we want them back in Search and Destroy, although they're probably going to be rather strong. It's been the case for a while. Really, it was Black Ops Cold War, the last tryout game where snipers were really good, and the pros thought, you know what, the game may play better without them, and I'm not really sure I agree with that assessment, but whatever. That's what was decided by the professionals at the time, and honestly, it's not changed much until the present day. Apparently, all of the snipers are going to be a one-shot from the torso up, which shouldn't be a massive surprise. It's more about the handling, really, whether the pros deem the snipers to be viable or not. The issue is the pros, they get stuck in their cycle, right? They decide, alright, well, the snipers are banned this year, and therefore, it was incredibly challenging to convince them to bring them back in Vanguard, although they clearly weren't incredibly overpowered, and it's not like we saw 4 snipers on the map where they did. Sometimes didn't even run them when they brought them back. So yeah, community versus pros on gentlemen's agreements, I'm sure is not going to go away when Black Ops 6 comes out. Let's talk about the Esports World Cup then, because Warzone and of course COD Modern Warfare 3 have been confirmed to be played at the Esports World Cup later on this year. Of course, it's the end of August, middle of August pretty much, when the Modern Warfare 3 stuff is. Now, there's been lots of debate. What actually is going on here? What does it mean for the teams? What does it mean for Rostermania? And all the questions that we have publicly are apparently questions that people have privately as well. There's lots of talk that this seems either rushed or not best plans. From, well, it could be one of two angles. Either those putting together the Esports World Cup have kind of, I wouldn't say dropped the ball precisely because we don't really know yet, but it is the first time running things, and there's about 1 million tournaments going on at the Esports World Cup. There's so many games that are going to be played there. I can imagine that logistically it's a bit of a nightmare. One of the questions has been, is it on the Activision Blizzard side, right, or the Microsoft side as it is now? Because you'd imagine that they took their time somewhat on this, because loads of the other games, Dota, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, like whatever you want to say, they've been confirmed at the Esports World Cup now for a long time, whereas COD only happened yesterday or the day before, right, when they actually confirmed it was going to be a thing. So maybe it's on that side why things have been somewhat delayed more than we might have expected. But yeah, as Ronnie says, it's not even a lot of the public details that known. People in the background have no idea either. This is why we see the pros on the timeline saying, like, how do I play in this? When's the roster deadline going to be or whatever? They released a rulebook pertaining to the Esports World Cup and talked a little bit about the Call of Duty tournaments as well, on when the clubs, as they describe them, can sign new participants and what the deadline is going to be for when the teams have to finalise their rosters. And this is now the big discussion at the moment, because there was a big talk. The World Championship happens in Dallas, okay, it's just north of Dallas, whatever, in the middle of July. After July, almost always, the teams will make roster changes, you know, of the 12 teams in the league, sometimes 12 make changes up like last season, or 10 or 9 or whatever. What do? Do you make changes then? Which is probably what will still happen before the World Championship, or before the Esports World Cup. But apparently, the deadline for the Esports World Cup rosters is in a couple of weeks' time, which is the day that Major 4 starts in Burbank, of course, before the World Championship. So the rosters that team may be playing with for the World Cup is potentially going to be different to the teams that they form after the World Championship. So I'm a little bit confused what this actually means, but CDL teams will essentially either have to play with their Major 4 roster or make changes before that for the EWC. So in the next 2 weeks, teams can decide, if our team we don't think is going to be good enough to, let's say you're a team that's on the border of making the World Championship or not this season, but there is a $1.8 million World Cup coming up. If you can form a better roster now, not only could you potentially qualify for champs, but even if you don't qualify for champs, you could still be with a better shout of winning much more money come the Esports World Cup in August. So that is the deadline that's been confirmed. And, well, what exactly does this mean, right? Because is it possible that teams are going to drop players after the World Championship, the actual Call of Duty World Championship, and then they're going to have to go back and play with their old roster again for the World Cup in a couple of weeks' time? That's what what it reads to me. Like, people are going to get dropped and there's going to be drama and people are going to be not happy about it, and then they've got to team up with each other again in a couple of weeks' time. Maybe as a result, the teams will say, you know what, let's just leave Rostermania until after the World Cup at that point, and then do it all again at that point. So, you know, this is the question, as Ben says, if the CDL is going to slide back their off-season deadlines to accommodate this, or whether we're going to see a load of short-term contracts, which is definitely possible. That we might, I mean, you know, JCal just discusses the possibility of signing some pre-agreements with teams, and then over the World Cup put them on like 14-day contracts. So, you know, potentially someone could say, all right, sign you to our roster now before the 27th of June, and then when it comes to the World Cup side, we can just do like a short-term deal and make it happen then. So, you know, I'm sure the teams, because we don't really know what's going on from the public-facing perspective, I'm pretty sure the teams have no real idea what to do either. Like, it is a bit of a mess, I'm not gonna lie. And this is when the 4 teams that have been invited, so FaZe, Thieves, Rocker, and Ultra, but apparently it is true, they will be playing for the Esports World Cup clubs, right? So Atlanta FaZe, they will play under FaZe Clan, Los Angeles Thieves will play under 100 Thieves, Rocker will play under G2, and Ultra will play under, I'm guessing, KOI, who are owned by the same people. But, you know, what does that mean from a technical perspective, as Ben says? Because, as I mentioned yesterday, Atlanta FaZe players, they are signed to Atlanta Esports Ventures. They're not signed technically to FaZe Clan. So it's all a bit confusing. And, you know, there's a big debate on this at the moment, whether some franchises could partner with partnered clubs, and therefore it's going to work that way. Nobody really knows. But, of course, the question is, you've got 2 weeks, effectively, to decide what your roster's going to be. But obviously, there can be more players than just 4, right? You can sign a substitute, you can sign a 5th player, or, you know, maybe even more than that, who knows? So it would potentially be plausible for OpTic, for example, to say, all right, Scump, we're going to put you down as our official substitute. And then when the Esports World Cup comes around, potentially you would therefore be eligible to play. Potentially Thieves could do the same thing with Octane, for example, just because why not, right? Let's say your 4-man team, you know, you change out one of the players or whatever. You know, it might be quite handy to have a viable 5th man there on the bench, just in case you want to make a potential change going into the World Championship, or the World Cup, sorry, God, it's going to be really confusing over the next couple of weeks. So there's no real disadvantage to putting Scump on the team, you would imagine anyway. So therefore the question's been raised to Scump, all right, like, what are you going to do? Are you coming back? Like, what's the situation here? So I wanted to share a couple of clips on what Scump said, because people have raised it. Formal, of course, has talked about a potential return to Call of Duty, and Scump says, look, he enjoys his life way more maybe now than he did before, when he was just grinding out online qualifiers the whole time and playing scrims on games that he didn't really enjoy. But he says, yeah, if the online stuff didn't really exist, he would still be down to compete, because he still enjoys it and is still keen to be up there on the main stage. And there's an opportunity in a couple of months' time to play for $1.8 million that potentially is there for Scump and others.
And are you coming back to CDL?
The player will discover other iconic areas of the castle, such as the Daniel Core.
I'm not gonna lie, brother. I love my life right now. I don't know if I'll change it.
It's much more
slower lifestyle, man. I like it.
Not
Way less stressful. I get to just turn my stream on and talk about
we have gear,
balls
we have
for hours.
Down enemies until
you guys
wake up by other people.
Somehow watch
like
it. You know what I'm saying?
If Formal wanted to compete in COD again, would you team with him? Do you want the honest answer?
Yeah,
or you want the fake
T2P,
answer?
bro.
Dude, honestly, I might have to think about that, actually.
This OpTic picks up a second franchise. You guys run the retirement home?
Yeah, 50 million in. Again, I always talk about it. I love being on stage, love like that feeling of competing, but the whole scrims and online circuit that's going on nowadays.
I think that drives everyone away, bro. Same shit.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. If it never changed formats, I might still be playing. No bullshit. If we were still flying to events at like once or twice a month, I might still be playing.
And Scump also doesn't rule out the possibility of returning if Formal is interested, and Formal's teased it, and to be honest, the Formal situation is tricky because he's still playing Halo, and during the time when the Esports World Cup is, I don't realistically know if he's going to be flying to Riyadh for like a week for an event when there's Halo stuff happening. it seems kind of unlikely. But if Formal said, you know what, I'm going to do it, would Scump say, you know what, I'm down? Because that was kind of the implication there. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Just so many questions right now. What is going on with the Esports World Cup? I'm sure we're going to get more information on this over the coming days. Few interesting things here to mention, actually. Cellium leads the way right now for team kills this season by quite some way. He's got 28 team kills this year. Ghosty, who, if you guys remember, last year on OpTic, Texas, was constantly team killing his boys. And even Ghosty was in the reply saying, look, I'm not #1 this year, let's go. So it's Ghosty, it's Clay, it's aBeZy, it's Skyz. And actually Cellium leading the way by quite some way, which is interesting. I don't know if he's, you know, shooting bodies so much that his teammates get in the way or something. But yeah, FaZe are averaging 2 team kills a series. Ultra have the least at 1, which is quite the differential, isn't it, really? So there must be something to be said on that, but I'm not really sure what that is. Just quickly on this, there was a great episode we released yesterday on the Breaking Point YouTube channel with Crim6 and podcast with ReeaL. Goes over so much stuff in this, definitely worth a watch, I think. He does briefly mention his Mount Rushmore. He says himself, Karma, Nadeshot, and, well, I think maybe he didn't mention himself, and he just said Scump, Karma, Nadeshot, and I think Clayster is the ones that he mentioned. But, you know, whatever Crim had to say on that, the talk was, do we go back even further? Because there was recent talk from Nature on this, that do you want to put some new gen guys on there? Like, does Simp belong on the Mount Rushmore? He even mentioned Kenny, which was maybe a bit much, but, you know, how does it go? Because to me, Mount Rushmore is like the founding fathers, obviously, literally is that. But if you're a real OG, then the founding fathers is more than Crim, Scump, Karma, Nadeshot, Hex, whatever. It's actually the real OGs. So we're talking about Moho, Assassin, Rambo, Big Timer, right? And, you know, that's what Nameless says. So then Clay is then saying, well, you know, what about Moho, Hastro, you know, Prof, Ray, like some of these Codfathers, right? If you want to, it's really interesting now because this about Rushmore stuff never goes away, does it? Now we're talking about like the Codfathers, who many guys such as Clayster, like they were brought in, or there was like a veteran that they played with at the time when they were really new to the scene, and a lot of those guys, such Rambo was a good example, and even Crowder slightly further on from this, but not like the real OGs. They help them grow the scene in many ways. And Nameless says, look, you've got to start from COD 2 when you're doing this stuff, which to be honest is kind of before my time in terms of understanding what was going on with the competitive scene. But there are indeed some matches this weekend, and of course starting this evening. Ravens, they play OpTic today. It's been a tough road for Ravens. They played 4 matches so far. They've gone to 4 Game 5s. They've lost 3 of them. They beat the Los Angeles Thieves. That is big. Today they play OpTic. OpTic lost to Vegas. They then thought, you know what, that was a bit cheese. They had 1 week of scrims, and then they lost to Minnesota Rocker. So clearly, they would have had a bit of a wake-up call after that one to say, okay, we need to get back on track here. That's even what OpTic Texas say in this. So they play today. Even look at this, right? Here's the Vegas Legion Dynasty. Johnny, Gio, and Attach with 3 of the top 5 KDs after the 2nd week of the qualifiers. Scrappy's here. Beans is here, actually, despite the fact that Boston are maybe not the best team, if you guys hadn't figured that out already. These are the games though this weekend, and of course especially the games for this evening. New York Subliners play Minnesota Rocker. You know, it's a big game for Rocker. They're not going to have accuracy. Of course, Spart is going to be there. Going to be quite telling, I think, whether Rocker have any chance, because if they're at least somewhat competitive in this series, they might have a go with Spart to try and make it to the World Championship. But if they're not, I think it might be chalked, because they play Toronto on Sunday, which is tough. Okay, FaZe Boston, I'm not really going to talk about that. Ravens Texas, though, is actually a really, really interesting series here, because OpTic are 1-2 right now, and they still play New York, and I still think they play Toronto, possibly OpTic. I think they play Boston as well. So, okay, there's a free dub against Boston, but apart from that, this is a really big series, and we have seen that teams like Minnesota Rocket, even Ravens maybe to some degree, and Vegas certainly, the teams that are fighting for the World Championship, they have leveled up their game, certainly against the top teams. And we know the top teams don't take the online stuff so seriously. So this is really big. Like, and if OpTic don't play substantially better, they can definitely lose this series. The thing is for Ravens that I still don't trust them in a Game 5. They were so close to losing Game 5 to Thieves. They really should have done. Thieves just bottled it so bad. So I just have to pick OpTic because I still don't have faith that Ravens could close out in 5. And I have a hard time thinking that they're going to beat OpTic cleaner than 5. So, you know, I think OpTic can win in any number of ways, and they should have a big bounce back from last weekend. But it is the Pred versus TJ battle, and we know that historically TJ has a rather good record when he plays Pred. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.